some.
Hello. Hello, who's on tonight working the Zoom for us?
That would be Tyrell from IT. How are you?
I'm doing well, Tyrell. Shahida Jones is doing our presentation tonight, and Brian never sent her a link to be a presenter or a panelist.
Okay,
Can
that's
you
fine.
please send
Just
her one? She's the one presenting everything.
sure. Does she have a link at all to the meeting? Because if she joins, I can simply.
I forwarded
Okay,
my link, but I want to make sure she can share, and I'm not seeing her on top here.
okay. Let me send that to her. I'm going to be sending it from the school board account. So tell her to look for that.
I will. Thank you. I'll step away right now.
Sure.
Okay. Jenny, you can shut that down. He's gonna send you a link. Okay.
Tyrell. Oh, there's my link.
There's your link. Good. Oh,
Okay,
okay. She needs to be able to share.
sure. Once she joins, then I'll be able to promote her. And here she is now. And there's her panel's access. Let me know if she's okay.
So Tyrell, I did hit to share. Um, I'm not used to Zoom, so I'm really sorry. Do you see my stuff?
I do not. It does show here on Zoom that you have. Oh, there it is. It
Okay.
went up. Yep.
Okay, and then okay, sorry, I am so like Zoom illiterate because we use
We use
Google
Google.
so much that
Sure.
oh no. It's gonna give me the worst anxiety of my life, and I don't have anxiety. There, okay, and then okay.
There you go.
Oh,
Right?
but
Go
I want to go
back.
back.
Use your back arrows.
Where are my back arrows? Okay. How are you, Tyrell? Which building do you work out of?
I am covering ESE,
Oh,
Smithfield, and JM Hill.
Oh, wow. You're quite the jack of all trades, aren't you?
I do what I can.
In all the buildings. Good for you. Well, we're very fortunate to have you, and I appreciate your help for this evening and your kindness for being here. So thank you.
You're very welcome. I'm gonna start the recording right at 6, if that's okay with you guys.
Yes, that is
Yes,
perfect.
that's fine. Okay, I'm gonna mute myself.
Okay, here we go.
Hello and good evening to everyone that has joined us today for our mental health resources parent training this evening. My name is Shay Jones. I am the coordinator of social services, and I am also a licensed social worker and with a focus on a lot of our mental health programs within our school district, as well as an outpatient provider to this area. So tonight I'm going to be kind of reviewing different resources that we have available, as well as ways to access those resources and services. So we're going to talk about some of the services, if you know your child may require mental health services. How do you find services for your child? What are the differences between the services in the home and in the community settings? And what supports are available to the caregivers, and how do you access them? And then how to also collaborate with our schools. So how do you know if your student, child needs mental health services? One thing is parents really and caregivers know their child, so they definitely have the ability to see and identify if there's some concerns or if they're not sure if there's something right or wrong. I always say speak to our primary care physician. Talk about those concerns, bring them up at all the different appointments you may have, especially early on. You know, we're at the doctors much more frequently, and they also do some screening at those early initial appointments. So anything that you're noticing or seeing, such as maybe delay in speech or walking, or eye contact and things like that, nothing is too little or too big to have those conversations and just to kind of see where they're at, because they also are experts in child development. And so some of that may be really normal, and as parents or caregivers, we just may be a little overly concerned, but that's not always the case. So it is really important to just have that conversation and not to be scared of it. Um, Look at our developmental guidelines for the child, and especially for the child's age. And again, those do vary. There is always typically a range of when a child should walk or a child should talk, or, you know, that self-expression and all the other things in between. But really kind of having an idea. And if you're not sure what they are, looking on Google, looking on the CDC websites and things like that will also help you with that piece. Look for areas on information or information on areas of concern that you find or that you feel that you're seeing. Trust your gut. And I know sometimes that sounds silly, but that is a really good way to, you know, kind of see, like, if I'm feeling super nervous about something or super concerned, trusting myself, because again, you know your child or the child best. Um, and then seek out those supports for yourself if you're not sure. There's a ton of supports. There's family, there's friends, there's colleagues, but there's also a ton of different supports out there as far as, you know, just support groups and so forth, which I'll speak a little bit more to later this evening. Okay, so the next big piece is like, where do we find our providers? And that all really depends on our insurance. So I reached out to our colleagues and, you know, people that we work with in the area. One of them is our MHDS, which is Mental Health and Developmental Services. and they provided me with some information outside of just, the norm. So one thing we can do is always contact our private and commercial insurance by calling the 800 number on the back or going to the website and seeing what steps are needed for accessing mental health treatment for our child. The website will have different people as well as calling, and they will have the most up-to-date information. Panels can change pretty frequently, so people can be added to an insurance panel, and we may not be aware that a specific provider was added as quickly as the insurance company who added them will be. So that is always your first safe bet. If your child is on medical assistance, also known as Medicaid, contacting Community Care Behavioral Health, CCBH, which provides the managed care for Monroe, Carbon, and Pike counties in Pennsylvania, and they will be able to also help assist and link you up to those types of services and providing you some additional information. So private commercial insurance and medical assistance, you must seek services through your private insurance first. So if you have both, the private and medical assistance, reaching out to your private insurance first to find a provider that also takes that. But MA may cover some or all of the costs that your private insurance does not. So if your child has Medicaid and private insurance combined, that can also be a benefit with getting access to services because, sometimes our copays are on the higher side for a specialist. However, with Medicaid, they will pick up that copay. If your child does not have insurance, children with disabilities may be eligible for medical assistance based on medical need and not on family income. And that's something that a lot of people don't always realize. So it's such a great benefit in the state of Pennsylvania and in most states throughout the United States, where if a child has a diagnosis, such as, like ADHD or autism and things like that, that can be provided to you by your primary care physician. You can also receive the MA, which can help supplement some of the cost to the services that are available. So ways to apply for medical assistance is going through the Compass website, which is linked on this presentation at compass.state.pa.us, or you can Google applying for medical assistance in Pennsylvania, and you will be linked over to that Compass website. You can also reach out to the Department of Human Services, DHS offices. I have also added the one for Monroe County and also for Pike County because they do service different locations. So depending on the county in which you live is where you're going to reach out to receive those services. And that would link you up to not just the Medicaid, but any other additional services such as the SNAP benefits and assistance. So types of services. There are a lot of incredible services in Pennsylvania that are offered to children with all different types of abilities or disabilities. And, it is one reason I think sometimes we have so many people that come into our state. When I used to work as a provider in Pike County, a lot of our families had identified like there was just great services here. And that was something to be super proud of. And so providing those services is really important. So I'm going to kind of give a review of most of the services that are available to our students. So psychiatrists, they are medical doctors who focus on mental health and will often be the ones to prescribe medication. They are incredibly trained individuals, especially those who provide medication to children. They have just so much training in those areas. And so I always say, I feel like they have more training than a surgeon. And so really trusting their input and having those conversations, that needs to come from a medical doctor. As a social worker, as a licensed social worker, I do not prescribe meds. I'm not the one to recommend medication. I will always recommend to anyone is to have you spoken to your primary care or to a psychiatrist about your concerns and if medication would be beneficial to your child. That is not for us to make a determination on. That is really solely up to the medical professionals. I know that question comes to teachers and supervisors and directors and all sorts of different people. And again, they are not able to make that recommendation. The recommendation will always be to go to a psychiatrist or to your primary care physician and have that conversation. They are the ones that are able to prescribe, but they're also the ones that are trained and understand and know if that would be a benefit to your child. And then we have outpatient services, which is a lot of times your psychotherapy. And that can be provided to you by a licensed social worker, a licensed clinical social worker, a licensed professional counselor, and a licensed clinical psychologist. They can all provide a diagnosis and provide interventions through therapy for your child. So really having some of those outside services is really important. A big piece with that is also providing that family therapy. A lot of times when we are seeing children and families are concerned or their caregivers are concerned around behaviors or, lack thereof behaviors, like sometimes it's like super depression, a lot of depression and, we're not seeing any behaviors, but we're not seeing like good behaviors or bad behaviors. We're just seeing very sad, lethargic, catatonic at times, individual. And so therapy is so important, not just for the child, but for the family. And I really want to emphasize that because that connection is really so important. As a therapist myself, a lot of that work I do is parent work and family work and caregiver work, and really bringing in those connections to best provide the best treatment for our children and for our students in that capacity. So your involvement as the caregiver is so important, and I can't emphasize that enough because it really does impact the whole structure down to the caregiver being able to tell a child, I don't like the way you say this to me, and the child can say, well, I feel like that's the way you talk to me, and in a place that's really a supportive environment. And so really having that piece is something I cannot emphasize enough within our outpatient and our therapy practices. And with outpatient, that's not just limited to in person in an office. There are virtual options as well. And that can also be done as a family therapy model, which is again with our children that are typically under the age of 14, 15, is really a big component of it. My most successful cases have always been when we do that family piece, when there's family involvement and family supports. But that also can be done through telehealth, and that's always an option, especially if one of our barriers to receiving services is transportation. Case management is another great service that is available through our MHDS, which is our mental health and developmental services. And they're a professional that can help you locate and coordinate the necessary services for your child and your family. But they also can provide at times transportation or linkages up to transportation for for the child or for the caregiver to access the different services that are available. Because one thing, we all know in this area is our transportation is limited, our infrastructure is not strong in every location to receive public transportation. I know Monroe County Pocono Pony does a really great job. However, it's more scarce into the communities, and some of those communities can be really far from a bus stop. Another intervention is actually our parent-child interaction therapy, which is utilized for kids that are age 2 to 7 with externalizing behavior concerns. And that really involves coaching parents as they interact with their child. And so I know that can be provided through our managed care organization. CCBH can link you up to specific providers in the area that have therapists trained in that modality, but it's a really great one and has a lot of evidence to support that intervention for families. Another big one that we have is our IBHS. It used to be called BHRS services, and now they are IBHS, which is the Intensive Behavioral Health Services. And that is a mental health service that is provided in the home and in a community setting, which also includes our school setting. And so it used to be considered just homeschool and community, and now they can consider the school part of the community setting. So just some more information about the IBHS services, because that is definitely one we see a lot of referrals to. And that is actually what I used to do prior to my position here. I worked many positions through IBHS, so I do have a pretty extensive background within that area as well. But some of the services that they have is the behavior consultants, and they help develop a special behavior management plan for the family, or for everybody that it will be involved. So there's usually interventions for home, school, and community. The mobile therapist that provides individual and or family therapy in the home or the community setting. And then also the behavioral health technician, which provides one-on-one interventions with the child, along with the child's caregiver. And really the biggest goal with the IBHS services is transferring skills and providing those skills to the individuals that may require them. And being able to like do that in all different locations, not just in the school setting. A big part of IBHS services is providing these services within the home. And I know that sometimes people feel weird about someone coming into their house, or that they need to mop and clean everything every single time that the individuals are going to come over. And that is not the case. You know, they become connected appropriately in a mental health capacity within your home. The staff members are not there to judge you. They're not worried about, if you have dishes in the sink, or you haven't unloaded your dishwasher, or if the kids tracked in some snow on the floor. That's not going to concern them. What they want to do is work with you and your family and your student and child to ensure their success. Seeing them grow is so rewarding. I got to do that for many, many years. And even now in the role that I'm in, some of my former ones I might see in different capacities. And it's always so rewarding just to see where the progress has gone in their lives. So it's just really one of those amazing services that Pennsylvania offers. And another term for it would be wraparound services. So if someone's like, oh, Pennsylvania has wraparound services, and that's what this is. And then they also run groups now, which is actually newer. And that's something that when I was there, we did not have, but the groups provide a lot of therapeutic interventions through structured activities, utilizing applied behavioral analysis. So that is a newer component of IBHS, but it's also a really strong one within having that group structure and those group settings. So the big one, we hear it all the time. I, as an outpatient provider, know the challenges that are faced with our wait list. And so wait lists can be very long. And I know that. I've had times where people have said, I've waited 6 months for you. And, we just wish that there was more providers out there. So I always jokingly tell people, like, consider a career in social work or in counseling and things like that that allow you for licensure and or getting your BCBA and doing some of that work because it can be really rewarding, and it is. So what do we do when there is a long wait list? So first is call your insurance and let the insurance company know. One thing as providers is we're supposed to inform insurance companies when we are not accepting new clients, or if we are waitlisting and how long that waitlist is. And this way that helps them identify if they need to add more providers to this area. There are times insurance companies will say like that your market is completely saturated with providers, and they're not aware that maybe some of their providers are no longer actually providing service. Or I mean, at one point someone said, we don't even know sometimes if a provider has passed away. So we really need to make sure that they're kept in the loop. So I always say, reach out to your insurance company, let them know that you are having a hard time finding a provider. And sometimes in some instances, they are able to call on your behalf and like reach out to a provider to see and say, like, this is an emergent case. Is there any way you can make some space for them? And sometimes it happens and it works. So, you don't, not to say to be the squeaky wheel, but sometimes we have to be. If you are put on a wait list, check in with those places. Continue to show your interest in that there is a need. And I know some will call you back, and some will not. So just kind of, again, being a squeaky wheel, and advocating for your child and what they need is so important. And that shouldn't just be limited to advocating for their needs in a school setting, or their needs outside of school. It should be anywhere you feel that your child has a need. Is that advocacy work as a parent is just as important, and is so important. Reach out to the school. So our schools have a lot of different interventions and services, etc. But they might be able to see, or they might know of someone that can help support, or they might have a contact. So reach out to your school counselor, reach out to your building leaders. If they're not school aged, reach out again and ask your PCP. They also have a lot of connections as well. But these are just some things, and the school may have some interventions that may be beneficial to start off with. And then as we slowly transfer those interventions while you wait get those services in the community setting. Because that is, outpatient is really great, and so is the IBHS. So wait list, what else can I do? So as caregivers, one thing I always say is educating ourselves the best we can on our child and on our students. So looking at YouTube videos or look for podcasts that discuss the concerns you may be having. One example is somebody like Dr. Dan Siegel or Dr. Ross Green. Both have written several books on, working with children that are really geared for parents, such as like No Drama Discipline or The Explosive Child, brain-based parenting from the inside out. And, Dr. Dan Siegel really talks a lot about the brain work, but he talks about like being a parent himself, and he talks about his own mistakes as a parent that he made, and not always using the interventions he recommends. And I say that now for myself as well as a parent, that the things that I always recommended, sometimes we just forget to do, and that's okay because we're all human. But they do have those podcasts available, and listening to them, and just getting some ideas and some thoughts of how do we intervene with our child, because they can be super challenging. And I always say, a dysregulated adult cannot regulate a dysregulated child. So if a child and an adult are both dysregulated, we are not going to be able to actually self-regulate, or co-regulate. So we really have to find a way to regulate our emotions and then help our student or our child regulate theirs. Another piece is reaching out to our schools, to your building principal, school counselor, as they may have services available. Schools do provide a program called Student Assistance Program, and that is really a program that provides linkage to services in and outside of the school. And I think one misconception often is that it's only going to link you to the services that are available in school, and that's actually not the case. And I will talk further about, what SAP can do for your child and how we can, you can refer your child into a student assistance program. School counselors sometimes, or our mental health professionals, have small groups that they lead. And based on that child's needs or that students need, they may have a group that fits what you're concerned about. We have groups on self-regulation, friendship, healthy relationships, all sorts of different groups, and those are led by our professionals. However, all of them do require parent permission. So just as a parent, if you're here or a caregiver listening, we're not just going to put your child into a small group without seeking out permission from you first. Individual counseling by the school counselor, that is a short-term service. So I know sometimes families will say, I'm going to refer them for therapy with their school counselor. And school counselors are not therapists. They provide individual counseling, about 3 to 4 sessions with that child, but it's not an ongoing piece. At that point, if we feel that there is a need for ongoing, the school counselor may refer that child to our student assistance program or to another intervention, or even work with you to get some outside services as well. And then the individual therapy that we do offer, which is led by one of our mental health professionals, who they are all licensed social workers or a licensed professional counselor to provide that more intensive therapy services. However, during that, they will also be working with the families on linking them with more outpatient services. So other students may access their services as well. And so these are just a few things that you can do while waitlisting. And another piece that we talked about last year a little bit in different trainings was providing that structure within your home and setting appropriate consequences. And they should be appropriate in age developmentally, or developmentally appropriate for age as well. I always say to parents, when providing consequences, don't provide something that you are not able to stick to. So I've heard, no video games for 6 weeks, and probably by day like 5, we're providing the video game because, they're at that point, we're just, I can't handle this. I need them to have a break. I need a break. Sometimes those games provide us just a little bit of reprieve. And I know that. So doing what you can and what you can stick with is really important. Don't take away something that's also going to really completely punish you in a sense either. So if that 30 minutes on the tablet is the only time you get to have a break to take a shower because of all the other things going on in the house, then be mindful of that. And what else we could possibly take away that may be an effective consequence strategy. But again, really sticking to that, sticking to structure and sticking to routine are key. And with the tablets, another thing I will actually add as well, and I say this to a lot of families I work with, is limiting screen time at least 1 hour before bed. That those lights, the black light really does affect us. It really makes it hard for us to get into our REM sleep, which then makes us tired and sometimes cranky. So really limiting that with our children and modeling that for our kids as well. And sometimes I realize that I'm not always the best at doing that. And I'll be on my phone, I'll be looking at something, maybe reading something, checking an email, and I'm like, it's bedtime. And so really just reminding ourselves to kind of take a step back and spend and be present in that moment. And I know some days it's hard and some days it's super easy, but it's kind of just really telling ourselves that we need to be present for our child. And as a parent, I do the same thing. I'm like, I need to be more present because I definitely see where we're having a hard time because I'm not paying enough attention. So some other things that are out there are parent support groups. So RIU20 is wonderful, and they have a wonderful parent support group out there. And I have linked their names and information, the 2 leaders of that group. They have a Facebook page, and the group meets monthly. I believe they do a breakfast. They actually came here last year, thanks to one of our supervisors, now principal at Middle Smithfield, who linked up with them and brought them in to kind of talk to us about how they get that engagement. And, they really support each other. They have really good working relationships with their schools and their student schools, but they still really advocate for their child. And so I always say that, like, building those relationships is so important, and having that piece where you're still going to be advocating for your child, is really important as well. So really working together and teaming with your school, to best support your student is ideal, and it's always really successful, because everyone really wants what's best for your student. Um, in Pike County, they have an autism support services, and I have provided that information there as well. And they do a lot of different events within Pike County, really well-established group and really connected with each other. And so that service can really help you link up to additional services out there, or create moments, like times to advocate and say, like, we need these types of services in this area. And I know, some of it can be challenging in Pike just because of how spread out, Pike is, as a county. And then, I have also linked up some parent support groups, and that was provided to us through MHDS. Our school counselors will all have access to this as well, and they will have this within our SAP groups, but there's a ton through churches, through online support, so we can also find them that way. Okay, so, sorry, I think I skipped a couple. Okay. So those parent support groups are super beneficial. Reach out. We have that list. We can certainly provide it to you. But definitely connecting to families with similar experiences, is really powerful. So, and it makes it less lonely. Sometimes I think, it can be very isolating. I've had a lot of parents share that, and that frustration and that isolation, or I don't want to bring my child to this because I know that this could happen. I don't want to have them at the grocery store because they'll have a complete meltdown and everybody's going to be staring at me. And one thing I always say is, I don't know if they're staring at you or your child. What I really think, they are empathizing with you. And they want to help you, and they don't really know if they can or how to help you. So, and also just blocking out the noise. So some days we just have to not worry about what others are doing or saying or thinking, but worry just about how much we care about our child, because that is the most important piece. Social media can be powerful, but it can be dangerous, right? So we can definitely see a lot of misinformation out there, but sorry about that. We do have great resources on social media. Some of the authors that I mentioned, I follow them on, different platforms, and they will provide different information or insight, quotes, and it kind of just reminds us of how important some of the work is that we are doing. And it reminds me of that for the families I work with, and for my own self, to give myself credit, myself grace. That days can be really tough and can be really challenging, but they can also be so lovely and so rewarding. And, seeing growth in however little or big it may be is just a reward in itself. When looking at social media, look for individuals that are accredited, and meaning that they have peer-reviewed information, they are legitimate individuals that are carrying certificates or certifications in specific areas. Just being really mindful of that. If you don't think that something is true that is being shared or said, investigate that. So, because there are models that are no longer therapeutic anymore, or that people just make things up and they pretend to have that background in therapy or intervention and they don't. So do the extra step and kind of just like confirm that, oh, this person actually does do that, like, and that can be helpful. So before I mentioned our student assistance program, and that is a program that is available in every one of our school buildings. Sometimes as a parent or caregiver, you may receive a phone call from somebody on our SAP team because your student was referred to SAP. In order to receive SAP, it's a tier 2 intervention through our multi-tiered system support, and it is referral based, which the parent has to provide permission for the student to be in SAP. So you may hear a phone call from what we have as a SAP case manager. They have gone between 2 and 3 days of training. The training just got reduced down to 2 days. Prior to that, it was a 3-day training with an agency who is trained as trainers for SAP training. So not anyone in our school district provides that training, but our school district staff get trained in the student assistance program. And it is only people that can know about a child in SAP are those who are on the SAP team. The child's privacy is kept, and it is very important to remain and keep that privacy. So once a teacher refers a student to SAP, if they are not on the SAP team, they will not know if the student is a SAP student or not. But really the purpose of SAP was to reduce barriers and to overcome them in our state. So every state has a different version of SAP, but Pennsylvania's is really truly about reducing those barriers. So a big piece of SAP is like that linkage to different interventions. So the SAP team will speak about the referral and the reason for the referral. So the referral comes in, the SAP team is meeting once a week, and we have a conversation about why this student was referred. And sometimes we say, well, this actually wouldn't be a SAP case, or because it's, academic struggles. And so that may go to our academic interventions instead of our mental and behavioral health interventions. The SAP team then looks at interventions that are least restrictive to support the student. So there's a bunch of interventions I'll talk about later, such as our check and check out, or check and connect. And so that piece is what is the least restrictive, and starting off with that, and then going to our more intensive type services like individual therapy. And then the SAP team will also support that linkage with services through case management and the SAP liaison. And our SAP liaisons happen to work for MHDS, the Mental Health and Disability Services. And so for Pike County, we have Erin Strayer, and for Monroe County, we have Carrie Denora. And they are both wonderful, have been doing this for a number of years, have incredible connections to the different service agencies in our community. And they can really help link you and people to those types of services. They can also provide behavioral screenings for a family as well. So if a parent has a concern, or we may say like, hey, they can provide this behavioral screening, which may help access services a little bit quicker on their end. Would that be something you're interested in? We can provide you with their information. And or if you want, we can have you sign a release and we can provide them with your information. So we're not going to give them any of your information without that permission provided by the caregiver. Another service we have is our mental health professionals, and they are our licensed social workers, licensed clinical social workers, or licensed professional counselors. And our mental health professionals provide individual therapy. Typically, we look at about 8 weeks for service. However, it can run longer, based on that individual's needs and also their clinical expertise. So if there is not a service that we have been able to link up to as far as outpatient for that student, and they truly believe that that child still needs, those services to continue, then we are going to continue with that. Another thing that they offer is different types of therapy groups. Permission from parents are required for all, despite age. I know in Pennsylvania, there are some, different rules around age. 14 and up can receive mental health care without parent permission. However, in a school setting, we still follow the rules within schools, and that is for them to have parent permission. So that parent will always be aware that those services are being received and provided. So some of our additional interventions, which are under our MTSS umbrella, is our check-in, check-out, which is also a tier 2. So in conversation of SAP, we might say, we don't really need to do group or individual. We're seeing some behaviors. Let's look at check-in, check-out. The student would then be provided with the point sheets that have specific goals. Each morning they would meet with their mentor, and in the afternoon. And so like they would start off their day reviewing their goals. And a lot of times it's set up based on our school-wide positive behavior expectations within our buildings. And then they would check out and see if they met their goal. And then at elementary level, the point sheet is typically sent home to be reviewed and then signed by the parent. It's a great service. We want to make sure that at the start, the goal is achievable. So sometimes parents will say like, they should be earning more points than this. And, we want to make sure that they are able to get to that. And so we slowly increase the number until we kind of just put them on maintenance and eventually discontinue the service as long as they are responding to it. So it's not meant to be a forever intervention. But it really does help students kind of like set up their day, and it kind of ends their day really well. And if they didn't make their points, that's okay. They review with their mentor why they didn't make their points. What could they do differently the next time? How do we support them? That's always a question. Like, how can we help you get there? And if you're not sure, it's okay. We can think about it. But it's never punitive or meant as a punishment. It's really trying to give students the opportunity to hold themselves accountable and self-monitor themselves, but also really also connect them to some of the adults in our building. Another intervention that's very similar to check-in, check-out is our walk and talk. And those are, students that may not need a point sheet, may not be having major behavioral concerns or behavioral concerns at all, but they're just not really connected to anyone in their building. So we want to connect students to the teachers within their building. And so this is one of the things that we do. And so a lot of times it's someone they may have known or someone that is like, we realize they have a similar interest, and we might say like, hey, you guys both really like Pokemon, and that might be a really great connection for the two of you. And so they talk about things that are interesting to the child, building those relationships, because those are single-handedly like the most important things that the most important intervention we have is the relationships that we have built with students and caring adults. Another service that is offered, this is for secondary only, is called the Renew, and that's the rehabilitation, empowerment, natural supports, education, and work. And this program is designed to provide highly individualized interventions for transition-aged youth with significant emotional and behavioral challenges typically focusing on improving school engagement, employment prospects, and secondary education pathways. So it really connects them to a trained individual. The person has to be trained in Renew to be the Renew mentor. And that person, that mentors that student, really looks at their interests, ways to connect them to their school setting, ways to connect them to employment opportunities and those pathways once they do graduate from high school. And so it's a great program as well. And then Check and Connect, which again is right now currently more in secondary. We are hopeful that eventually we will bring that down to elementary. They are doing more research on that as far as like within kindergarten in different areas. So, provided that it's successful, this is something we eventually can look into. And again, this is a tier 3 intervention, so it's more intensive. And it's where students meet with a trained mentor for about 40 minutes per week. The mentor and the student look at patterns and barriers that reduces the student's engagement in school. It's an evidence-based program to create connection and reduce the dropout rate. And so those things are super important because when students feel more connected to school, we see them attending more, and the less amount of absentees that they have, the more likely they are going to continue success and to graduate from school. So those are just some of the interventions that are offered through our MTSS framework, which supports the academic, the social, emotional, and the behavior of our students. So it is a framework that, hits all 3 areas for students. So one of the biggest things I talk about is like our school and home connection. And it is so important. Services should not just occur in one place versus the other. And, a lot of times we'll see only wanting services in school, but a lot of that change and shaping change really happens when it's a connection between both home and school. So those wraparound services, when I worked in IBHS for many years, it would always be like, we really just want the services in school. And, because we're seeing these issues in school, we're not having the same concerns at home. And that's completely understandable. It does happen, or vice versa. We have really challenged behaviors at home and none of that's at school. And so really looking at those interventions, like, when I had students that struggled or clients that struggled at home, but really didn't have a hard time at school, it was super structured, environment, or the response was so quick and immediate that these are the things that would work. So we would actually emulate that stuff at school or at home and take that framework that the teacher had and bring it into the home, and vice versa. Being able to say to someone working with the student, these are the things that work really well at home. Can we maybe look at some of these interventions and if they would work in school? And obviously, not all of them are going to be appropriate for school, and not all of them will be appropriate from home that we have at school. But that piece of like conversation that we bring when we come to the table with the whole team is really important as well. Communication, talking to your child's teacher, principal, or school counselor will allow the school to best support your student. So just informing them, and even if it's just once in a while, like, hey, last night was a tough night. We got home super late. Um, the dog was throwing up. This happened, and this morning, they just seemed a little off, and I just wanted to let you be aware of that. That's appreciated. So then we know, like, okay, they might be off today. What can we do? What can we do to support them? How do we help them through this and navigating? Again, the IBHS services are great, but they're great and they are so much more successful when it's a true wraparound model, and we're doing that work in the homeschooling community. Um, Home services are beneficial to supporting the student in interventions at home, may be beneficial at school. So allowing them to come to your house. They're not there to judge you. They're not there to worry about the dishes. Like I said earlier, um, they're there to help support you, come up with the interventions, and then transfer those skills so that they are yours to do. And that ownership is so important because you're with them, they're yours. And we want them and you to be as successful as you can. And sometimes it feels defeating, when you're just not sure, or when you feel like you're doing all these things and nothing seems to be working. And sometimes we're just doing too much, and there's too many interventions. And so kind of like scaling it back and like focusing just on a couple of things. Setting up norms, at home. What are the family rules? What are the things that are hard nosed in this house? And what are the things that, okay, not my favorite thing that they do, but I can handle that. Like, you know, um, and kind of coming up with that, choosing those battles. That's a big one I always say to people is we have to choose our battles with our child. And so really choosing them is going to be so much better for us. Because then we are as adults don't get as frustrated and as angry. Um, when we know that, okay, my kid really struggles with putting their shoes away, and I'm not going to continue to get upset over the shoes, because there's bigger things to focus on. But for some families, putting your shoes away is so, so important. And I've had families say, like, Shay, I cannot let that go. Like, I just can't walk away from that. Like, the shoes have to be there. And I'm like, okay, so then we know that that is something that has to be done, and we have to work on that. Um, Outpatient services are also really beneficial. As the therapist can address more in outpatient than the school-based therapist with our mental health professionals. So I know that there's sometimes those barriers. So again, we can look at telehealth as well. But really, the trauma, if there's trauma in the history, or attachment and things like that's really not going to be well addressed in school. We don't want to bring up a child's, trauma and then send them back to class, and them having a really hard time. So really linking up to highly trained professionals that are on the outside is also going to help. Um, as well as, we do have our mental health professionals. They are incredible. They do a great job. And they are highly trained therapists. But again, some of it is just not going to be appropriate to be done in school. And that's where we will continue to really help link families up to those services that are going to be better for them outside. Wow, I took more time than I thought. And then so now I have opportunity for questions or additional information that you would like to have.
If
See,
anyone has questions, if the chat is accessible, please put it in the chat. I'm not seeing any. I'm not sure if do we
I'm not-
have no, do they have the ability to text in chat?
They should, yes.
Okay, thank you. All right, there's no
I see
question.
I see a hand raised.
Oh, yes, we do. Okay.
I don't know how.
Yes.
Hello?
Hello?
It's
Yes, Viviana? Hello? Saw her hand, but I don't know how to get her on. Oh, her mic is off.
There you go. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Now I can. Sorry. I'm
Just
not a
wanted
Zoom
to let
person,
you know-
really.
Yeah, I just wanted to let you know your chat was still disabled.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
If anyone has any questions, they couldn't put it in.
Oh,
Sorry, I'll
Okay,
take
so
care
then
of that.
raise your hand if you have a question. We can
Okay.
do that. Okay. Shay, it doesn't look like there's any hands. I appreciate you doing this training for us. You are always a wealth of information. Oh,
Thank
my-
you. This was
my
a
hand
lot
there,
of
sorry.
information. Oh, I see another hand raised.
Okay, let's try that one. There you go.
Hello,
Hello.
I was wondering, you had encouraged if anybody was considering a career path in social work to consider this. My question is, if you are interested, but you don't necessarily have the finances, are there any resources or tools or trainings available to help someone who wants to come and join the group helping others? Like, are there any other trainings or links you could look into?
Absolutely. I don't know off the top of my head all of those that, would be available. I know some agencies or companies will pay for a certain amount of credits towards a degree in mental health or social work. I do know that there is the opportunity without a degree to, I believe, do the behavioral health technician. And there's a course that you can take online for that, but I could probably link you up to some people in the IBHS. But I could definitely look and see what's out there. I know for myself, I had to take student loans, which isn't always easy and always feasible. And there's scholarship opportunities out there and grants. And there's a ton of those out there to like look at as well. But specifically, I'm not really sure. Um, I know some children and youth like agencies have a program, and I don't know if the one up here in Monroe still offers it or not. But they have a program where you can work for them and they will pay for your degree, and then you have to stay for X amount of years post graduation. But I can take your information down, and if you have an email and you want to put it in the chat, I don't know if the chat's not working.
I can email.
Okay.
All right.
Um,
Thank you.
you're welcome. And my email is my full name, so it's Shahida-Jones at esasd.net. So you're welcome to email me as well. And that's anyone that's here tonight as well. Like if there's questions that you weren't necessarily comfortable asking in a group meeting like this, or you think about certain things, or you're looking for additional like information, just reach out. If I don't have the answer, I will always certainly look for that answer and help link you to the people that may have the answer.
That email again, please?
It's okay. My first name, Shahida, Shahida, and then a hyphen, and my last name is Jones at esasd.net.
Got it. Thank you.
You're welcome. And Viviana, do you have a question or?
Yeah, I noticed that it was recording for YouTube. So we'll be able to watch this again.
Yes, you
Yeah.
will.
That's awesome. Thank you for the information. It was very resourceful. I got a little bit more than I've already known. So thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you. I appreciate that. And again, if there's ever anything that you need more information on, I know that there's so much more out there to share. Don't ever hesitate to reach out. And or if you just want to like talk through something, I can make myself available and help support you through some of that too.
Okay, I appreciate it. I just may reach out to you having
Yeah.
another question involving the outside services with the inside services and kind of making sure that they're blended, because my son does go to ESC and he's in emotional support. So he has his IEP with the wraparound services. So my thing would be, how do you work on blending the two together with the IEP and their care plan?
Absolutely. We can definitely help work through that with you.
Awesome, thank you.
Welcome. Thank you. Anything else? Anyone else? Well, I want to say thank you, everybody, for being here tonight. I really do appreciate it. I'm glad I was able to bring this information, to everybody and to share. Again, there's always changes. Things are always, advancing, developing. New providers, as I said, are always being added based on graduation or licensure, passing, et cetera. So don't hesitate to call your insurance companies again. They are the ones that have the most accurate information, as much as we, as a school district and myself, even as an outside provider, try to keep up on that. It changes so frequently, or somebody could be added tomorrow and I might not check for like 2 more weeks. And I'm like, oh, there's like 3 more providers. So just reach out to them, but it also helps them identify if people are no longer providing. I've had that where I'm like, this person does not exist anymore. And they're like, oh, really? I didn't know that. So it's that piece as well. But thank you everybody for attending. And I hope you all have a good evening.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.